What's up, everybody? This is Tim from Arc Tactical. Really excited to share with you this episode with Tim Valentine. I know two Tims. But the reason why this episode is so important to me is that you're going to get a picture of what it looks like to work in a juvenile corrections facility for over a decade. Tim Valentine has a wealth of knowledge. He has an amazing career of truly investing not only in the community, but investing in his fellow officers. And I'm really excited to share some of the little nuggets that he has to offer. With that being said, we do speak a little bit about our in-service training. Tim does a lot of our in-service training for our Arc Tactical. And with that, you can go on to arctac.net. That's arctac.net to talk all about our in-service training packages. If you're an agency that's struggling with training, we got your back on that. Take a look at it on the website. Reach out if you have questions, and enjoy the episode. All right, we are sitting down with Tim Valentine, and he has a wealth of knowledge and a huge career. And I'm really excited to share his story with you guys. So Tim and I, we met back at the State Academy doing kind of an interesting role there. And it's where we would suit up with impact resistant suits and fight police recruits and corrections recruits 30 at a time. And I mean, I'll tell you, those days were so much fun, and we learned a ton from them. But I think one of the biggest things that I learned from those days is just building relationships with great people. And that's how you and I kind of got squared away. And on a side note, Tim is one of our ARC trainers. He does a lot of our in-service trainings around the state, and just a great teacher, great presenter. And I'm really excited to have you here, buddy. Thank you for doing this.
Oh man, thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity to come out and be with you, man. This is super awesome. Yeah, dude, back in the day, boy, you took me back. That was TNT dynamite back in the day, dude. Holy cow. Honestly, I tell those stories. I can't, getting on in years, my bones and my muscles don't do that type of stuff anymore. But there was so much learning that happened in the middle of all that, and so many different transitions I think we were able to see from that time of training and the way that we were out there doing it. Go after them like this, or now let's try to teach them this. What an amazing thing that was to have actually been a part of. I think it was a golden time for us to have joined and come in together. And
that is so true. And for those of you that maybe aren't from Washington State or seen how things were done there, back in the day, there was a long academy with multiple, I think it was probably at the time, I'm butchering that, I'm sure, but 400 hours of defensive tactical training that all kind of culminated in a scenario role playing. We used to call it Fight for Life, and then they changed the name of it. But essentially what it is a way to really put a bunch of stress on our students. And it's not, let's be honest, it's not like a real fight. But we would give them some heat, and we'd make them react and see how that panned out. And I think early on, there was no real training goal out of it other than we wanted to show them that we could, give them a hard time. I remember days coming out of there where we'd have kids' shoes tied together. We'd be wearing their duty belt and their vest. And we felt amazing about it. We thought it was fantastic. But when you look back on it now, wasn't a ton of training value for those guys. What they knew was that they sucked and they needed to have more training, which I guess is, valuable in and of itself. But that transition led to, hey, maybe we should give them some tools to be able to adequately deal with the problems we were giving them. And that's what we did. We kind of refined it. And I really appreciated that version of what we were doing then, because you can kind of see the expected outcome. You can see the wheels turning in their head and being able to produce a result. And I really appreciated that. But for I don't know, maybe 4 years there, we obliterated them. It was a bloodbath.
yeah, I can remember the times of the raider or the safety, whatever the name was called back in the day, and we'd be in one of the old taverns or the old apartments in the mock city at the time, and they'd be like, I get them, yard sale, everything goes away. Which was some of that old mentality of we gotta let them know what they don't know, and we gotta put drill sergeant type of stuff on top of them. Which there's, I mean, some I can see some of it, but then like you mentioned, without the tools to answer the problem, it's like, hey, here's this huge mathematical equation, but I'm not gonna teach you any math. I'm just want you to go solve this huge problem that you might die from.
That's right.
So yeah, it was, and a lot of it was for, I would be lying if I didn't say it wasn't for our entertainment at the end to giggle and snicker. So
Absolutely.
I'm super glad that we saw that we were part of actually changing that, and looking at how do we make this better? What is it? What is it they need? And then what are the specific parameters of what we're supposed to do according to what's happening out there right now in the world, rather than just destroy some poor young cadets.
That's exactly right. And I think uh, kind of going off on a tangent, but I feel like there's so many trainers out there around the country that that's their goal, is to show their students how cool they are, right? And I having been that guy and realizing we're not really improving anybody. Like, this isn't actually helping anybody other than my self-esteem. Um, there is a better way of doing business. And if you're
Yeah,
out there teaching a training class and you have to do that self-check of, hey, why am I doing the thing that I'm doing here? And if you don't have an answer that focuses on bettering your students, you need to check yourself, man, because that is not the way training should be accomplished. This is coming from
100%, man. That's why I'm so glad you're out here with your mission, doing what you're doing right now, because it is all about humility and all about making them better. It's not about you're not about putting yourself or your team up above on this pedestal. It's how can I serve you as the learners, the participants, the new officers? What can I do to serve you, to elevate you? That's what I love all about your mission and how you're doing this, man.
Oh man, that means the world. Yeah, really, we had Ian Edwards on um, last week, and one of
Yeah,
the things
Ian,
that
nice.
he's such a good dude. But one of the
Yeah,
things we talk about with our de-escalation course, but it's true of any type of training environment, is we have to make our students feel safe and comfortable to push their own boundaries, right? Nobody's going to push
100%.
those boundaries if they feel they're going to get slapped down. And there's just no value in that. People learn when they're happy. People learn more when they're excited. They definitely do not learn when they're terrified or humiliated. And so
Hmm.
learning some of those early lessons, because trust me, didn't start out this way. That is not
Right.
Ryan, if we should, oh yeah, just immaculate conception of this idea. That is
Uh
not what
huh.
happened. But great points there. So yeah, old academy days, good times. I think I'm very curious to hear about what led you to training. And I think that's probably a long story that starts with the first agency that you and I met at, really, which was when you were dealing in the juvenile corrections world. And
Yeah.
those of you that don't know, Tim is going to go into some good detail about what that looks like. But juvenile corrections is such a different way of doing the job than adult corrections, and it has very unique challenges, very unique guidelines and standards. And I think, how many years did you spend in juvenile corrections?
With state juvenile, I spent 15 years working with them.
Wow. Okay, well, tell me the story. How'd you get there?
Man, boy, that goes back. Dude, we got to go back to the 90s, my man.
I
Holy
don't even
cow!
remember the 90s.
Yeah, dude, it's a great times, right? So I'll just take you back. Where we're looking back in like '99, if I recall. I'm part of a dislocated woodworker program, right? I worked in the woods. I worked doing mobile home stuff, just catching jobs, where I could to make money. I grew up pretty rough. My family, people I grew up with, you talk about dysfunction. I grew up in a lot of it. I was the guy who had super long hair, rock and roll shirts, all that. Like what you picture of me now, people can't believe what they see. Those who knew me from when I was younger and growing up, complete
No way.
different. Yeah, everybody voted me the one to land in prison, not actually work as somebody who is going to be part of prison.
Well, they
So,
weren't wrong. They weren't wrong.
yeah, right. There I am. There I am. And that'll take me to another story inside of the state juvenile facility I worked in. But I'm part of a dislocated woodworker program, right? I'm just trying to make ends meet, and I walk into this state-run juvenile facility, and they're hiring, right? A lot of us people coming out of the woods in the '90s saying we need jobs, and we're getting free college. So I walk into this place. I'm like, hey, I think I could do some good here. I've started turning my mindset from what I grew up in. I grew up with what a lot of these kids are involved in. I've seen it. I've been there. I know what they're living in. Um, I think I could do some good here. What college should I be taking to come work here? And they're like, hey, we love college. That's great. And then the security manager looked me up and down and said, when can you start, big boy? And And
That's
I said,
awesome.
well, sir, I have a family and I have a mortgage and I have a young, child at home, and I would love to start ASAP because I have bills. And so that's kind of how it all started flowing together. Obviously, all the interviews and the evals and everything came from there, and then trying to hit some college. But as soon as I got in there in the '90s, early 2000s at this place, man, it was in the door running. They were, I think, adjudication for they were declining on a lot of them, so a lot of them were even getting adult time. But what some people don't know is that this state facility isn't just like 14, 15, 16 year olds, right? At the time that I was there, you could be held on juvenile youth, or get the maximum of juvenile youth up to 21. So you could be 21 staying in this place, right?
Wow.
Current legislation within the past 2 years, if I recall, has changed it to 26. So
Ooh.
now you're a juvenile until you're 26. You can be sentenced to juvenile life, or you can be sentenced to adult. You can be sentenced to the Department of Corrections time, but still be housed there with programs, because obviously being run by the state and Department of Social and Health Services, there's a lot more money in those programs for opportunities of programming and education and rehabilitation and treatment and all this stuff. Much more
Sure.
caseload opportunities than you'll find in the adult system. But again, that's where people got this idea of, oh, you're working with kids. I'm like, well, the average age at the time that I was there was probably 17. And I don't know how many people remember I don't know what I was like when I was 17. And there wasn't too many people telling me how to live life and what I was going to do. That chemically
No,
you're
everybody
ready to
thinks
push
that.
against the lions and go do work, right? Like, I
Yeah.
know everything. I'm a 17-year-old man. Um, and not to mention all the dysfunction a lot of these poor, kids had growing up, and the things they were involved in, and the negative influences, drugs, gangs, everything else. So I got to go to work at this place, and man, it was an eye opener from somebody who came from, I understood the dysfunction, the part of the dysfunction that I grew up in: heavy drugs, heavy domestic violence, lots of unlawful activities. But then I was I never had a whole lot of experience with extreme gang culture and how that influences young minds and stuff like that. So I was immersed into a lot of that in this place too, with all these poor kids had absent families and were being picked up by the gang mentality and the gang culture to just live, survive, eat. So I learned a lot within the first bit there. I was working 80, 90-hour weeks, easy.
Wow.
Like we were just go, 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 constantly. Um,
What was this may be taken back, but what was your process like to get hired there? Did they pardon me, did they have like a interviews obviously, but did they have an
yeah,
oral board? Did they have a polygraph test? Did they have a background? Like what did that look like?
yeah. So, man, great question. There was no polygraph at the time that I was there for that. I think they were still trying to figure out what this thing looks like for the population they were serving, because it was changing so quickly during that time, and it still is right now changing.
Yeah.
So I did have an interview with three or four people there all at the same time. That type of interview, all the applications, the background checks, criminal background checks, all those things that went through. There was no official psych eval or polygraph or anything like that went through for that.
Is there now, do you know? Did they switch to that? Because I know to
I
be a
do,
police officer and a corrections officer and certified as those things, you have to jump through those hoops. But
I'm not sure that is part of their hiring process to this day. I can't speak factually to that, but I'm unsure that that's still a part of it.
yeah, well, that's
They,
what,
they ask people to do a lot for that place, and it's you got to wear a lot of. I mean, in our profession anyway, and correct, you got to wear a lot of hats. But I'll tell you right now, specifically in a juvenile area, whew, those you better add a few more hats to your backpack to put on.
the thing that I was so surprised about, and when I was the corrections commander at the state, that role covered adult corrections as well as the juvenile corrections academy. And I
Mm-hmm.
know that the area that you worked was not, it didn't fall underneath that academy because it's a state facility. But what was interesting when I took on that role was that they're one of the most, they're, first of all, they're responsible for one of the most underserved populations ever, the most volatile populations ever. They're trying to prove themselves. They're very dangerous, but they're also the most vulnerable populations ever.
Yeah.
And their training consists of 2 weeks. 2 weeks blew me away. I'm like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, I can't believe we're getting this much blood out of that rock. Just impressive for what they have to deal with. And one
Mm-hmm.
of the other shames, honestly, is that the pay for those officers, you certainly don't join that profession, that area of the profession to for the money. You just don't. You do it because you
Yeah.
care. You do it because you want to serve your community, and there's so much nobility in that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, just kind of blew my mind.
There are still people I talk to this day. I mean, I was there for 15 years, so I have some that are just close as family that have been there, and I've known very recently. Well, over the past few years, several of my brothers and sisters in that area are passing away.
Yeah.
Because they're there until they pass away. We know that this job is very difficult. It's stressful. One of the people I worked with in our intensive management unit today back there just recently passed away of a heart attack. Not
Mm,
an old person, or 50s, right?
wow.
But that shows the stress and the amount of time. And that individual was there from the time I started there too, back in the 90s, right? And
Yeah.
I know they weren't there for the pay because I can tell you, ain't nobody there making money.
Yeah.
They're not making they're making enough to get by. They're
Yeah.
not making enough to be well off, right? So
Right.
the only reason they're there is for the clients that they're serving, for these residents and these kids that they want to see have a better shake of life. There's no other reason that they wouldn't be.
And for the type of person that has to do that, they really have to get joy from that process. You know what I mean? To
Mm-hmm.
keep going, to have the motivation, and um, man, that's incredible. Because I think you're probably going to see a lot more of that. I was talking the other day that the gap between when a police officer retires and when they pass away is actually not that much, right? It's pretty close. But for corrections in general, it's way less. I
Mm-hmm.
need to research this stat because this is like the second time I repeated it. And I have no idea what I'm talking about. But the 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 reason I believe is just the amount of stress that people are under, the negative environment. Like nobody wants to be there. Like nobody wants to be there. In fact, they hate being there. And that challenging environment is really a pressure cooker for our officers. I can't imagine that gets better when your clientele is dealing with an undeveloped brain. I can't
Yeah.
believe that that's the case. So
No, there's a lot of aggression, a lot of I mean, I'll just put there's a lot of aggression. There are high levels of testosterone, um, low levels of cognitive thinking abilities. You mix that with mental health considerations that a lot of them are coming up with, PTSD. A lot of them have severe trauma. I mean, and that's just a powder keg for danger.
yeah,
And it blows up on a regular basis with inside those areas. And you're talking training. A lot of them are. It's a couple weeks,
yeah, yeah.
right? And that's what I experienced. And that's what kind of got me into how do I. I remember I went through their on site. It was like a week long, basically use of force course, right? It was 40 hours of some habeas grabus, How do I do some things? How do I bend some wrists? How do I put cuffs on? 8 hours a day on the mats, go, go, go. That was back when we had to test in front of the camera. They break out that big
Right.
VHS camera, right?
No
My name is Tim
pressure.
Valentine. I am of good health. I am going to do a straight armbar takedown.
Right.
And then we
Right.
do the thing. Um, but I remember after doing that, and I was blessed with so many great mentors, dude. And they're still in the game today, man. I've got, Dave, Kenny, and so many awesome people that just took care of me in that. And I remember one of them, and I'm just gonna call him out, Dave, because I respect him so
Mm.
much. Um, he was going to be my boss. Like I landed on his crew. And so I'm going to this
Right.
training, and I remember I was acing some of the tests. I was young, I was strong, I was fresh out of the woods. I could still move and groove. And I remember hearing him say, "That's one of my guys. That's one of my guys." Because I hit like all three. I hit all the primaries. I aced whatever technique it was. I remember him saying, "That's one of my guys." And after that, I'm like, this is pretty cool. Like I want to be part of this team that
I
wants to
am one of
like,
your guys. Yeah.
yeah, right. And I remember, and everything was rock and roll, man. It was fights and fights and fights. And I remember seeing like it was just all the time. My first night on the job there, I was shadowing with a guy. I remember standing by the booth, and all of a sudden I watch an individual. They said, "All right, time, lights out, shut it down, head in, everybody." And I watched the dude start at the top of the hall and run to the end and just cold cock some kid watching his last little bit of TV.
Oh no.
And everybody starts running. The guy I'm with, who I'm supposed to be shadowing, like I don't. He takes off and leaves me. He's running down there and is jumping on for the fights on. I'm the guy in the booth next to me. I look at him. He just goes, "Welcome." I'm like, "Well, all right,
I guess
here
this
we
is what
go."
I signed up for, man.
Um, yeah. So I remember talking to Dave. I'm like, "Hey, man, like I can, dude. I grew up rough, man. I grew up in the woods. I grew up like I can fight, man. I get it. Like I will jump on strong. I will do a thing or two, but it seems like you guys have this way of how to do a thing or two correctly,
Yeah.
and how to do it in a way. Like I want to know, like how do I do that? How do I do what you're doing so that when I'm out there, it's not just going back to banging heads? Because I remember how to bang, and they said you should be a DT instructor, man. Why don't you go do that thing? And that's kind of where it all spun off in there. I'm like, why don't I just go? Why not me? Why not me? Why can't I?
Yeah.
And so that's that. After that, man, it was a cascade of a million different mentors who honestly helped me through this thing to finally end up where I am sitting here now. With you having there's a lot of things that went on since then, but
Yeah.
now here we are having a conversation about that.
Well, what's interesting is, kind of in those days when they say be a DT instructor, the state program has gone through so many different changes, but at the time it was a
Mm-hmm.
really robust, challenging program. I
Mm-hmm.
Not to walk people all the way through it, but the first class was a 2 weeker that was just super intensive, and it attacked all kinds of different angles. Like you had a pseudo medical degree by the time you walked out of there. You knew how the
Right.
body worked. You knew all that stuff. You knew legal case law. You knew a lot of tactics, but it was less about the tactics themselves and more about when to deploy them and then what to expect after that happens, right? And so um, to be selected as a DT instructor, uh, it was a challenge at the time. Like
Mm-hmm.
it was a big deal. And I seem to remember, and maybe your memory is going to recall, but I think to be a master DT instructor, you had to go through a whole litany of different classes. I think there was like 8 other classes that you had to go through. And,
Yeah.
but because of, some of the constraints that juvenile corrections had, like there was no firearms in juvenile corrections. So when they had a weapon retention class, they weren't going to let you go, even though it was a requirement to be a master DT instructor.
Yeah, yeah, great. So, man, here's you're absolutely right. So when we fought, very, and when I say we, I mean the people before me. Like all credit to the individuals who came before me and really paid this. So, CJTC and the academy there was the industry standard, right? Training was supposed to be based off of what they had. And if you had an area, even in juvenile, where it was, we still have to go maintain these people. It's not Department of Corrections adult. It's not this, it's this other, but there's still some things we have to do. And so the industry standard says this. So we actually have people who are working with CJTC, and there was the Juvenile Academy and their stuff. And they're like, well, what since you're not going to send them through the correction officers academy at the time for county jails where they'll learn all these other tactics, you got to have something. And so they took bits and pieces like the straight arm bar, the gooseneck, the right, pick some of your primary couple things, and they said here's the little menu, and here's the time, and that sort of checks some of the box, right? So now for some of those, all you needed was some lower, like level one at the time. I think it was called instructors, level ones,
Right.
twos, and you go on to the other stuff, right? And so the idea at the time, though, and you hit on this in the first class, was not only about medical stuff and case law stuff. It was also how do you take this motor skill and how do you give it to a person? Because there's a whole
Right.
science behind that. Like, yeah, I
Yeah.
can't just because I know how to do something really good doesn't mean I can tell you how to do it. Because I got to look at you and figure some things out about it and environments and all these other things go into it. How much time do I have? What's the room like? What are the participants? And so some of that class was about that. And then every class after that was kind of built on that. Here's another little bit of thing to make you better with your hands. And now here's also a lot to make you better here so that you
Yeah.
can give this skill to other people.
So
So
many
that
connectivity
is
out
what we
there.
used with them to say, listen, you, even though, yeah, it's firearms, and yeah, we understand that we're not using firearms here, there's still a huge component of motor skill development that we need to get them, and this is a step to get these people to that master instructor level, which really is the culmination of now you got somebody here in your agency who can help you develop these programs and develop these people and make and have instructors underneath them to really do good for all, and not just DTs. Take it to any motor skill, right? Take it to pat searching, take it to cell searching, take it to anything that involves using your body or anything else. Those same principles apply.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think um, the ones that, and it's kind of a finite list these days that are still in the game, but the ones that went through that program are way better off in just the teaching aspect, I feel, because there are so many practitioners out there that can do a thing, right? They can perform really, really well, um, but that transference of information, how can I make this person a better fighter? And I remember one of the guys
Mm-hmm.
down there who was making the same argument. He said, I might not be able to beat somebody in a fight, but I know that I can take an unskilled person and they could take an unskilled person. And I know that my person could beat their person in a fight, right? Because they can
Yeah.
have that transference of information and be able to perform at a
Mm-hmm.
level that is really, really successful. So, and
Yeah.
and on to your point about that weapon retention piece and try to fight an uphill with your admins and trying to get them to understand that whole motor program of, hey, somebody's trying to take my gun is the same thing as somebody trying to take the keys off of my belt. They're trying to take my
Right.
radio. It's the same thing. But when we talk about, using terminology like weapon retention,
Mm-hmm.
people get blown out of the water. There's no weapons in
Yep.
juvenile corrections. Never happened.
Yep.
Really interesting.
Yeah, it's
So
it's what's in a name, what's in a title, and I still fight with that to this day, even in my current position. Man, it's let's at this point, I'm like, let's just change the name because
yeah.
I know that the substance will be the same. If you would like a different name, what do you want to call it? Let's go with that.
Well, we started doing, when we developed the 10-week corrections academy there,
Yeah,
we introduced weapon retention essentially, but we renamed it. And I actually stole this from the program manager a couple of generations before me, which is Todd. You know Todd.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah,
yeah, old school guy. I love him.
yeah,
But he called it equipment retention, and I thought that was such a great robust term to be able to say, no, guys, it's not just you have to have a gun type thing. So
yeah,
we stole that, invested a lot of time because when you are walking into a general housing unit with 30 people that are in there, you need to have some abilities and some capabilities. And so really am glad that we kind of stuck with that. And honestly, I don't know what it looks like now, but we were doing some good work with that. So I was proud of that.
hmm,
So you became a DT instructor and you got your master instructor, right?
yep. It took me some years to get there. I did the slow road. I know some were able to get it banging out in a year. I went through and recerted level ones probably two different times and then slowly started bleeding in the others. And some of that was because it took us that long. Kenny was working real hard for me. I'll give Kenny all props. I had so many mentors. You mentioned Todd. Todd was one of my mentors back in the day, too.
Yeah.
He was also a juvenile person back in the
Yep.
day. So I got to learn a lot from him about that. But Kenny was my main go-to, and he kept me in the program. He kept feeding me so many different opportunities at stuff until we finally got them. Because he was already an MI, so they're like, "Why do we don't need no more?" And Kenny's like, "Well, sustainability. We need like
Yeah.
I'm not lasting forever, and we need more." And Kenny's like, "I'm a manager of this and that. I need people to do stuff. I can't do everything."
Right.
And a lot of it is him. Just we should support our team. Any place should be like, I'm going to support these individuals who want to keep our everybody safe and make everybody be better. So finally started, and I think it took me about a year and a half after that to finally get through. And I honestly didn't even finish the final little bit, the actual video and some other stuff that we all had to do until I made it to my new agency when I finally left Juvenile. And
Totally.
that's the, yeah, that was a whole other extra again talk about trying to say why training is so important because
Yeah.
it costs money. When training costs money to have good individuals do good stuff and take care and be safe for everybody involved. That requires some ducats to be paid.
Well, as it should.
Yeah,
You never want to skimp out on training or toilet paper because you're going to get
never.
you're going to get something. But I think that putting in that investment in, I mean, I'm sure you have 1,000 stories of people that came back to you and said, "Hey, thank you so much for the training because this
Mm-hmm.
incident happened and it made me successful." Right. So it's so
Mm-hmm.
critical. And it's funny, administrators, and I shouldn't say that as a blanket statement. There's so many good leaders out there that understand that dichotomy there, but you're either going to pay now or pay later, right?
Yeah.
And the difference is if you're paying later, somebody's probably hurt, right? You're probably made it on the news or YouTube or something, and it's an ugly situation. Morale in your agency tanks, like it's really, really bad. If you pay now, it's going to be cheaper than the lawsuit for sure. You get to invest in your people who now feel like they're empowered to make some good progress because everybody wants to have a purpose, right? And then you get people that are more well equipped to deal with these challenging situations. Injuries go down, use of force goes down. It just seems so clear. But if you're pushing buttons and you don't understand that, what that really looks like, that's when people say, "Nah, we don't need training. We'll be all right," until they're not. So
Yeah, I think that was one of the biggest lessons I learned from a lot of the mentors as I grew up into this was it's not always about how much you know and how much you can do with the class. They said a lot of this is how you sell it and get it to go with your administration and the higher ups. And because a lot of them are, and right, because taxpayer dollars are real.
yeah,
I'm a tax, like I get it. This stuff is real, and being fiscally responsible with the money that your place spends is a very important thing to those who are putting the money forward. And so a lot of our job is not just to teach, but to show, to do the research, to find the data, to find the science, the evidence based standards that say here is why this is good, and here's also how it saves our taxpayers money down the road. It's not just ripping people off right now. Like this is a good thing for health, safety of everybody and fiscally responsible at the same time. So that's a hat that not many of us talk about because I don't think we really like that side of the house is
no,
having to do the research and the data and pull all this together because it's a lot of work on off hours that we don't really oh, not really. I would say we don't get compensated for it, but we do it because we love it.
that's it. And you mentioned you mentioned people in juvenile doing that work not for the money, but because they love it. It's true
Mm-hmm.
in so many different aspects, especially as an instructor. If you're trying to build a program for your agency, you are not going to get paid what you're worth. You're just not.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to do it for other reasons, and really a lot of it is, or it should be anyway, making people better, right? And
Mm-hmm.
fighting those dragons that are trying to stop that from happening, whether they're good intentioned or not. And so I really believe that uh, the extra effort, all the extra hours, they pay off, and you might not see it right away. You're not going to see the benefit until one day somebody's going to come up to you and say, "Hey, thank you for doing what you did," and there's a lot of nobility in that. So, um, that kind of leads to what you're doing now. So you were in juvenile corrections for 15 years, and an opportunity came up.
Yeah. So again, it's amazing how I keep going back to Kenny on this. This guy, he has really influenced my life so much. I'm going to have to call him after this and tell him
Yeah,
thank
yeah.
you. Um, we had done a lot for the place we're working at, right? We had a great program going for security management, behavior management, use of force stuff within the state facility there. We had we worked together and started their first FTO program that Juvenile has ever seen, based off the San Jose model, right?
Wow.
Of course, we had DORs, SEGs, and we modified some of it because we noticed that on the onboarding, there was no, like, people would come in, they didn't really know, like, how do I get my ID? How do I get through? What do I do? What, I don't know what's happening. Like I told you, my first experience was just hanging out with somebody, and then there was a fight. And I'm like, well, I guess I don't. Do I go? Do I not go? What do I do? And so we really changed that whole feel and had an official FTO program to help understand where our learners were at any given moment. Also, it was the FTO's job to meet them up at the front gate, like, hey, welcome. We
Yeah.
are so glad you're here. Here is some stuff. Here's some knowledge. Here, let me help you go get your ID so you're not asking what to do. Let me show you as we walk from this gate to where your place is. Let me point some things out to you rather than just sending you. And
Figure it
so,
out for yourself, right? Like that is
right,
not a lot of
trial by fire, which had become, and I'm sure a million of the corrections professionals around the world can speak to this as well. That's how I was taught.
yeah.
That's so what? Why should we do any different?
Most dangerous
Um,
words, right? This is the way we've always done it.
oh man, right? I know, and I understand change hurts. I get it, but my goodness, it's time. And so we did a lot of those awesome things together. So, and every one of those little steps, I got to go be a certified FTO. I got to go learn program development, curriculum design. Like, they kept just sending me to courses to learn and to grow. And we finally got to a point where Kitty's like, "Hey, we've done a lot here. It's kind of where we're at. The plateau is hit. This is kind of where this place is going to be. There's some changes coming down the pipe." And Kenny said, "I see this spot for the Department of Corrections. Because I think you would be great for it." And it was a instructor at the Full-Time Academy there.
So it's teaching
Um,
full time. And
yeah.
prior to that, if you don't know, and a lot of us were like this, is we would be full time corrections officers, right?
Hmm.
And then as an auxiliary duty, we'd be instructors. And what that turned into is you're working like a lot, and you're being
Hmm.
told your schedule is not a set
Yeah.
schedule. You're being yarded around and doing all this stuff. So being able to, especially as an FTO, by the way, because field training officers, they can either make or break an organization.
Yeah.
And one of the things that you said during your time there, you developed an FTO program. Prior to that, there wasn't anything, right? Can you
Yeah.
imagine? Can you imagine working at an agency that just good luck? So
There you go.
it's a huge
Here's
liability.
keys. Here's a radio. There's 20 of them down there. Don't let people leave.
Yeah, that's basically it. And if there
Hmm.
was ever an issue, whenever I review cases and stuff like that, one of the first things I say is, how are you trained to do the thing that you did? And if your answer is, well, they handed me keys and a radio and said good luck, you might as well just start writing zeros, right?
Yeah.
But all of that work there, all the auxiliary duties that you were running, to be able to shed those and just do what I think at that point is what you love to do, which was
Yeah.
full-time instructor. What an
Yeah.
amazing opportunity. And so, um, in that role, and it was at the academy, right? Is it the core academy? Am I butchering that, or is that accurate?
Nope, that is absolutely correct. Department of Corrections, separated from CJTC. I want to say back in what, the 90s,
Yeah,
somewhere in there, maybe. So, and it's because there's such a huge entity, right? And
there's no way
CJTC
they
had
could.
fine. I mean, you look at the waiting queue right now. There, it's like a year.
Yeah,
And
dude.
prisons division, plus community corrections officers division. It's a huge monster here. I think currently we're sitting on 9,000 some employees. And
Wow.
so to expect CJTC to manage that was just unrealistic. And so it started back then and built and became a full on academy, right? We currently have a 6 week program, which when you think about it is still not enough. I
Right.
wish that we could follow the 10 week legislation. I wish.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wish we had, like Norway does 2 years of college education for their people.
Yeah. I know.
So
Crazy.
yeah, imagine that. And so all these things, but yeah, man, I was so blessed to be able to come over and just focus on that. And it wasn't that I didn't love the people that I was working with in the juvenile or the residence or the stuff. I have a passion. Like, man, I would lift weights with them. I played basketball. Man, I had some of the best experiences and time in my life in that place doing things, along with all the negative as well. I try to focus on all the good things. There's a lot of good things that happen. But it did relate to eventually, I got to get paid for what I do.
Yeah.
I have a family at home and I have, long-term goals of my own someday that involve me doing some stuff. And I'm doing some stuff that involves a little bit more compensation for that. And that's what, unfortunately, a lot of places lose individuals to. So I did get to go over and it was something, man. A full-time instructor. Again, I'd been at CJTC with you and we taught, on contract gigs
Sure.
and taught, but to be the one, who's in there now, and then you got the other outside contract people coming to you. Now, like I'm the one who's like, now it's all on my shoulders.
That's right.
For
It's a different
for this
perspective.
group of people are mine.
Yeah. Well, and
Man, what?
so you said 9,000 employees, but
Yeah,
how many people were in a typical academy class at a time? What did that look like?
man. So when I first started there, I think we were probably running about 20ish. I'd say that was our average. We've had some that spiked up to 30. So I would say between 20 to 30. We tried to keep around 18, but again, for those who don't know about our field, retention can be very difficult.
Yeah.
I know that we hemorrhage or have been hemorrhaging probably about 40% or more, maybe even 50% within the first year. Um,
Seriously.
oh yeah, COVID obviously decimated us.
Sure. Yeah.
But even prior to that, retention is tough because a lot of people come in to this corrections environment and they're not like we're not the most well publicized. We don't have our PR is not out there. People don't know what's going on beyond Orange is the New Black or whatever reality show that's out there, right? That
Right.
spends
Right.
6 months on scene to get 30 minutes of footage.
Right.
So people come in with this, and recruiters do a good job. Recruiters are there to recruit, and so they're going to tell you all kinds of things. They're not going to tell you the stuff though that we live with. Like you were mentioned earlier. The life expectancy and the stress and stuff. Of course, a recruiter's not going to say, "Hey, you might not live long after you retire here."
Right.
That'd be
Right.
a silly thing to recruit people with. So we do get these numbers in there, and we try to keep up with them. But we've seen some classes even recently. Like I think one we had like 42 people in it,
Oh
and
wow.
that's just that's a ton. That's a ton to teach to. For anybody who's ever taught to a class, they even think of a high school class. They think of having 42 individuals in your high school classroom or your middle school because that's what some of them relate to at times by the
Yeah.
time they all get together.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be able to invest the amount of time and get them to meet the standard, right? That's really the issue is we have this finite amount of time, these many instructors. How do I get everybody in here to do the thing? Because if you don't pass people, well, that doesn't help. Obviously, you need people
Yeah.
to pass and meet the standard. But if we're shedding people off at the academy, it all kind of goes to that mechanism of the instructor and being able to
Mm-hmm.
wear all those hats. So in your academy, you said 6 weeks. What type of stuff do you cover? What does that typically look like?
Oh, dude, when I got there and I got to go through all the manuals, instructors, and lesson plans, I was like, you all got like a basic law enforcement academy wrapped up into here. Like this is a lot of like I see the hours that you've allotted, but this is a lot of hours of what it really should be. And they're like, oh yeah, the very popular saying was it's a cool drink from a fire hose. Like no kidding, it's a cool drink from a fire hose. So it's everything you can imagine. or maybe not imagine. It starts with foundational basics of what is corrections, what is Washington State corrections specifically, what do we do, what were we envisioned as, how did we get our start? Is actually kind of a baby agency if you think about it. You go back to the 70s and 80s, right? It was all DSHS and stuff back in the day, and
Wow.
until the division was finally created around the 80s. So you think of some other correctional entities that are their own corrections department, like we're still in infancy
Sure.
when you
Yeah.
look across nationwide for Washington State. But we're also, and I'll go ahead and say that, one of the leaders in some of the stuff we're doing right now nationwide too,
Interesting.
which is kind of interesting as well. The youngest and some of the leaders. But so they would have the basics of what is this place, what is it I'm doing, where do I fit in this picture, and then kind of right into introductions to how do I just talk to people, interpersonal effectiveness skills. How do I de-escalate and talk to people who are having a bad day? Introductions to behavior management, how to recognize people who are having a bad day and how do I talk to them about it? Introductions to paperwork. For those who don't work in this field, I'm telling you right now, man, paperwork. And I think you and Ian talked about paperwork
Mhm.
and stuff when like he got called to do a paperwork class or something. Probably the most important class that can ever be held. And I'll even I know a lot of people are going to get angry at me, some of the listeners out there, but I would say paperwork is even going to be up above use of force and other stuff. That's how high paperwork is in our stuff, and people don't really know how to write very well.
No, man.
So yeah, to be able to articulate why and what I did and put it down on something that makes sense to all the other readers out there in the world, it's a huge deal. Not only to help treatment or anything of our individuals, to capture what's happening in a day with them, but all those basics. And then, we did have at the time when I first started there was 32 hours of physical use of force activity, that's small, right?
Yeah.
Because and that's what the policy said. The policy mandated at the time 32 hours of physical or of use of force training. And so now I have gotten that up to about 48 hours,
Wow.
to
Okay.
include some others. So it's we're small little bites at a time. But remember, earlier we talked about you have to really show the evidence and produce the data and the research because more time equals more money every time. So I've been able to increase little bits at a time, as we go. So they go through all the same stuff any other corrections people would, all the physical grabbing a hold takedown, the handcuffing, all the different restraint systems that are out there and available that the agency purchases to. The OC spray. Everybody wants to talk about OC spray, right? That's the one.
I don't talk about it. I hate it.
I know I don't either, but every academy speech that we have an academy student come up and talk, they're like, the OC spray brought us together, and it does. They all get
Yeah.
sprayed, right? And then they all have to go do their combat drills or whatever else, their survival drills, and then sit there and talk about it afterwards, and while they're fanning their faces, like,
Marinate in
whew.
it. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
right. I mean, holy moly. So they go through a lot of that, and they develop. I mean, just like any group of people, you get people together for 6 weeks, some hotel living, some not, and there's a lot coming at them. It is by a fire hose. So you see the dynamics start popping up. Week 1 and 2 is usually pretty good. Then you get into weeks 3 and 4, and real personalities start coming out, and that's where the other hat of the instructor, like now I'm the behavior management, I'm the mediator, remember, everybody, we have values, we have a mission, we have a vision, and here's where we need to go with this stuff, because humans are humans. And when you're having test anxiety or struggling, we get a lot of people who, English is a third, fourth, or fifth language, not even as a second, right?
Yeah.
And so trying to consume material and do this because they feel they have this calling for this, but they're trying really hard to consume the material and understand what's going on, and all the different cultures and everything come together. Trying to they get stressed out, and so trying to work with these people through those at that end is a huge thing. But I think the students learn a lot
Oh, sure.
through that as well too.
It's
I mean,
that
we put them in these pressure cookers, right? And they're like, hey, we gotta work this together, and we gotta understand, because we still gotta be one team, one mission in the end. Um, and a lot of them do. They pull it together. They work really hard. They get through this. They go through those scenarios. We have a lot of those open skill scenarios that we talked about earlier. That you and I are only the ones that that we do now are very specific. I have very specific role plays written out that say the role player must adhere to these parameters.
Yeah.
And here's the reason why, and here's the objective we're looking for the learners to meet by the end of this course of study. And it's very beneficial for them to go through this. I'm hoping to get some more time for them, but they work really hard when they come in, and a lot of them are the unsung heroes, and they're going into culture change. Everybody knows that the cultures of prisons and what we're doing. I mean, look at the law enforcement reforms that we've had.
Yeah.
Look at the bills that have changed how we do business. Even though some of the prisons division stuff for state prisons and even some of our county jails was not included in some of that, the intent's the same. They're going to want to see a lot of these things. So we are definitely trying to teach a lot of these new people, and they're going into these environments, of course, where you got some of the old culture from 30, 35 years ago
Right.
who is like, well, but in my day, this is how we did this, and that's how you're going to do it. And
It's hard.
that can be difficult when you're looking at rehabilitation.
Yeah, and I there's a lot of attitudes out there that I've encountered that are like, hey, well, if you're thinking about rehabilitation and using that type of language, it's a hug a thug type program, and I don't subscribe to that. I mean, that's the goal,
No.
right? That's the goal. Is it going to be successful on everyone? No, not at all. But
Mm-hmm.
if we're getting some that could be contributing members of society, that'd be
Mm-hmm.
great. That's what we want. That's the whole mission. And so I think that's a huge piece of the process there. And I think it's so valuable what they're doing. And I think as the instructor, you do have to facilitate so many different things. It's people that are not, it's not just I'm a teacher. It's I am a coach, right? I am a counselor at times. I am a documenter. I am like, cause you don't just get to have an incident, because there's a lot of personality conflicts that happen in there. It just, not just in yours, it happened in every academy, any class. People, I don't like that guy, right? So it's going to
Mm-hmm.
happen. And so you have to wear so many different hats with doing it. In a class of 46, how many instructors are you having in that type of environment?
Oh man, so this one they have a main program coordinator that's assigned to them. In BLIA, they would be like the TAC officer or something,
Right.
right? Or right? So they have, because these are all full time people who work out of the DOC Academy. So it's kind of a little different field than CJTC. So you have one main program coordinator, and then they have the home cadre of instructors. I think that current assignment, because again, since COVID, our poor teams have been dispersed to the winds. We closed a location in Lacey. These poor people have been everywhere, not just the instructors, but the poor officers who are trying to go to these locations and just get education as we try to survive, still continue to survive the fallout from the pandemic.
Right.
They had, I think, 3 full-time instructors assigned to them. Now, keep in mind though that this class would be a lot of, just because of room and space availability, would be split in half. And so while some of them are out in the gym, a couple of those instructors would be managing defensive tactics stuff, and
Right.
then the other instructor would be. So these people are out there full time all day running around with these students who are also running all day. So if you think about any good opportunity for a lesson plan or teachers, a lot of times even teachers will have a break in between some classes, or their period where they
Yeah.
get to go reset, not just a lunch, but I'm talking a whole period. That doesn't exist for a lot of our people. There is no reset and a 30-minute lunch, but I promise you what they get maybe is 15, because at the end, you get to the end of lunch, right? It's 12 o'clock. All right, students, time for lunch. You get 2 or 3 that want to ask you a question about something.
Oh yeah.
You're not going to send them away. You're just going
No.
to, oh, here's this, here's this. Hey, what about, hey, I heard graduation, something. And so, but then so you go wolf down food, and you got to make sure you're back 10 minutes before the start of the next class so you can get all your stuff pulled up, make sure everything's functioning, handouts are where they need to be, right? Because you should always be there prior to any students coming in.
And be
Um,
enthusiastic enough to hold their attention.
yes, and be ready to go. So I mean, it's a testament to the cadre of people within the current agency, and any, I'll go to any training place out there right now where the people are doing it like this. It's a testament to them, and to dedicate their time to these corrections professionals who are trying to come in and be introduced to the job.
Yeah, such a huge responsibility. Not just to the agency, because that's true as well, but to those individual officers, right? They have to set them up for
Mm-hmm.
success. They have to set them up for being able to engage with some of the most violent and challenging population that we have. So
Mm-hmm.
good on them for those that are doing it. So how long did you do that until you landed in your current role?
Oh my goodness. So it's probably been, dude, what year is it? 2024? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I lose track of time. Uh, I want to say right up until earlier this year. Um, I want to say probably right around January
Okay.
2024, somewhere in there, or November, somewhere in there, I transitioned to curriculum and program design. So I'm not a full-time instructor anymore. I'm not out there bouncing up and down off the mats anymore. And so
Have
this
to
was
remind
the,
us of that.
I know I get to get out there mixing up occasionally, and so some of this decision was twofold. I was the use of force. I was the statewide use of force program coordinator for a couple years,
Mm,
so I'd already started stepping out of the full time instructor role, trying to get my hands more on how does this program work and how can I make it better and have statewide operations. And that that was actually a fairly new position that we kind of created together because I kept trying to sell this idea. I got there in 2015 and I kept selling this idea like you guys need somebody who kind of operates this thing. It's like facilitation the same, but it's a little different monster. We need somebody who collaborates better with your subject matter experts and the owners of stuff because there's several different departments within our this large state agency who own certain bits of education. We just in the trading unit kind of carry that out for all these owners of stuff. And so we did that position for a while. And then unfortunately, it also COVID fell in and really kiboshed a lot of things. So a lot of the ability of me to be able to manage stuff was turned more into let's just fill holes and keep the
right.
machine running because the machine had to keep going. We couldn't just shut down. We were training people still in COVID that was like, hey, stay 6 foot apart, but still go do physical tactics. So I mean, and I get we
I
got to keep
remember
like
we did it too.
yeah,
It
the
was a nightmare.
facilities need people. We just couldn't shut down a prison, right? You can't just walk up like, here's all the keys. We'll see you guys in 3 weeks when I'm done on quarantine.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
yeah, stuff had to keep going. And so we kept the business going. Um, but unfortunately, that position never really got to its glorious of what I thought it could have been.
Mm,
And honestly, right now we're at the FTE kind of needed to be switched more to something that made more sense. Our team is hurting. They need an FTE of a full-time instructor, and it was kind of pulled from there. So they needed that. So I found my niche now. I was like, well, I can do a lot of the same stuff in designing and just be a program designer. And it did twofold. It's my body's getting broke. So not being jumping down up off the mats anymore, or having young people beat me up. Cause I was always like, take me down, grab me, let's go. I'm tough. Right. And so I'm doing that on a less, habitual basis all the time. And now I get to sit here and really dig into the legislations, to the laws, to design, and have a huge impact on what it is that our facilitators are actually delivering. And I'm one of the only ones who actually has a subject matter expertise in the use of force side of the house that's on the curriculum team.
sure.
So
Yeah.
that was kind of the other driver is it helps me. Like I speak the language of the subject matter experts and the owners.
That's so
Whereas,
cool.
yeah, in the past they would go to somebody who doesn't like if you don't know these things, you're like,
Figure it out.
what is that? Yeah,
Yeah.
static cling. I don't know what that is. What do you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that's, for if you're an instructor out there, one of the things that comes with time, because I'll tell you, when I first started, they would say, hey, we want you to teach this. And then I would just go teach that and really have no plan of what I wanted that to look like at the end, the steps, benchmarks to take to get there, and how to document all of that. And so the curriculum development and curriculum design piece is such a underappreciated component, but it is so critical because again, you got to be able to explain how did you train the thing that you did. And if you don't have it documented, if it's deviated from that documentation, if the documentation isn't really facilitating what you're hoping to get out of it, it all crumbles down. And so I don't know if you can speak a little bit about what it's like to develop curriculum and kind of how what your process is. I think there's a lot of interest in that.
Yeah, man, super awesome question. Thank you for that. So it has changed some. I'm going to tell you since COVID. In the back in the day, we would be able to put together a simple plan for like you. If I knew Tim Fosnot was going to go deliver a class, I knew like, well, all I really need is the performance expectations, some objectives, and a couple have tos if there's any. And he'll go do it because he's an educated subject matter expert who's been doing this for a long time. He just needs a little bit of a roadmap and he'll know where to go. What we're experiencing right now within my area specifically, and I know a lot of other areas that I've spoken to, having gone out and done stuff with you and experienced some of the other areas, is that their training departments and their teams have been decimated. Some have none, they have zero. I can tell you ours was completely destroyed for instructors, people leaving or having things, or just like, hey, this is not for me anymore. I have to focus on the actual job
Right.
because that's all there is to do. And so we put on for brand new defensive tactics instructors, probably within the past fiscal year. I bet you we had 6 courses, and it's usually once a year.
Yeah.
Like one course a year is usually all it's needed to keep the ranks. And so and a lot of them that came in to do this had never even seen an annual in service. So these are
Right.
people who have only been on the job for a year.
Right.
Or like, so hey, I'm glad that you're excited. You want to go do the thing, and you're still pretty new.
Well, and that's the thing is I got the opportunity to go train on a lot of those,
Yeah,
teaching rap instructor class, and they are
yeah.
hungry. They were super excited to be
Oh
there,
man,
and it's great to see because you can see it's on their faces. They're really excited to be
yeah.
there. So that's one of the components that is a huge check off the list because sometimes you get people that were voluntold to do that.
Right.
So
Yeah, no, these people are hungry and I love that. And the other part of that equation is he was like, we had to slow the classes down at times and be like, you're not like we need to dial it back because you just don't have the experience or the prep or what was going into prior to coming into this type of thing. And so which leads me to now there a lot of them are coming in and doing some deliveries. So I can't put together a course design that I would have given to you. Like there has to be a little bit more substance to it now. So we're finding ourselves looking at not only what is our delivery team like? How new or where are they at in their development? And which is going to directly reflect what I need to put in to help get them to the correct marks for legal defensibility for the best. And also, what are the people that we're bringing in now? Who are they, and what is the job? Job task analysis is big, right? It's a Department of Correction, Department of Change, right? I'm sure people have heard that a million times.
yep, yep.
There's always something changing. So what is it that's happening now, and what are best practices, and what is driving us? And that's really where the focus is and has been, at least for the place I'm working at right now. Um, but it's how do we, and also look at what are the how would I say it, personalities even of the people who are sitting down in our classes now. How are they receiving this, and what do we need to do to get it there? And I mean, the world
Yeah,
changes.
yeah, absolutely. And
Mhm.
for those of you that don't know, when you have to really get detailed in there, you are at some points writing down exactly what you want somebody that's going to deliver the program to say, like down to
Yeah,
that type of detail,
yeah,
and being able to think about, okay, what are the words that I would want this person to say in order to make that student learn the thing, right? And so
mhm.
it is such a huge challenge to do. And to your point, without getting boots on the mat there, you wouldn't, it would be a much taller order. I think you have a perspective, you know what you would do to make it
Mhm.
successful, and being able to translate that, you are probably a godsend for the people at that division in your agency there.
It is. I've seen some good stuff. I've had some good reports come back. I've also had some good constructive criticism on a lot of the stuff I put out there. I've always been a hands-on physical guy. I've always kind of had the ideas and I can scratch it out on a whiteboard. Like we can do our Mad Labs together,
Yeah,
and you and I could walk away and be like, oh yeah, let's go, plan made.
right.
But to actually make it work on paper and do stuff has been a whole other learning curve for me and the computer and not being up doing stuff, and even I'm a teleworker now, which is weird. I'm a people person, so I've been trying to understand how this whole world works now,
Sure.
um, and reminding myself to actually go do stuff. But putting the stuff on paper and getting it out there, and then working, and then going and seeing how they're doing it has been just another blessing for me, because I'm learning a whole other. I'm advancing my knowledge in how this stuff works
Sure.
come completely. And sometimes it's not about how I would do it. I also had to learn that the other day when I was putting, like, well, this is how I would say it, how I would deliver this class. And somebody else called me up, and God bless them for calling me up short. They're like, well, does it always have to be the way you do it, Tim? I'm like,
Oh yeah.
well, no, I guess it doesn't. Well, what's your thoughts on how this part should go? And they're like, well, I think it would an activity like this and this. I'm like, that's actually really good.
We should do that.
So it doesn't have to be me coming through on paper. It needs to be structured in a way that involves the learners and the participants. Right? Nobody wants to be lectured to all the time. Like, they want to be involved in their learning. There's a lot of science that goes behind that as well. And so it's finding those things to keep people engaged and doing stuff as close to the job as possible, whatever that course or module is. It doesn't. Everybody's like, oh, it's all just use of force. No, there's so much more that goes into being a corrections professional than just working on the mats all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, it truly is a comprehensive profession.
Mm-hmm.
Not just being the babysitter, and it's not just thumping and
No,
bumping. It's a lot that goes into it. So
no, it's
very cool.
everybody wants RoboCop, but they don't want to pay the Omnicorp price for it.
That might be the line of the episode, bro. That's awesome.
Oh my goodness, it is something else. The things that and I see the training they get. I get it, and then you come back to them a year later though after, and like, hey, what do you remember? Because it was just so much at a time, and how much are we going back to it and touching back on it? It's rough, man. God bless those people for going out there and doing what they do year one, year two with what they're being armed with.
Yeah. Well, and that's, as you know, our mission, right? Our goal is to really provide um, ongoing training, and that's really where you've
Mm-hmm.
stepped up to the plate and helped Arc Tactical, and that is our in-service training programs. And for those of you that don't know, if you're an agency that struggles to have your own instructor, or your own instructor that has a comprehensive breadth of knowledge that can go and impart that, we help, and we have designed in-service training for a bunch of corrections and patrol agencies around the state and other parts of the country as well, and really help with the end goal of having a distributed training model that isn't just a one and done. We come back and have reoccurring training so that we can build and reinforce the information, with the ultimate goal of having our corrections officers be safer, and having, reduced liability and less use of force, all that stuff. And it's proven to be really successful. We haven't had a bad report from any of our people. They love what we're doing, and truly that's a testament to what you're doing for the company. So thank you so much for everything. I was thinking of how to close this out, because we run the gamut of all kinds of stuff. But I think what I really want to ask you is, if you could tell somebody going into juvenile or adult corrections one thing, one piece of advice, what would that be?
Oof. You might have to let me have two pieces of advice.
All right, you got it.
You might have to let me have two, man, to isolate that one. Because I've kind of changed. I used to have a different order. I'm gonna make. I've changed the order recently after understanding some things and growing up. It took me to finally get almost 50 years old to grow up a little bit. Um,
Well, let's take advantage of it.
yeah, your wellness and your family are priority. I will put that first. Your wellness and your family are priority, and they are with the journey with you. So have good plans. You cannot be a good corrections professional unless your wellness and your family are put together with you, because they are on the journey with you for every second that you're there. They are with you. And when you come home, they're with you because you bring it with you. We always say we don't bring it home. We all know that it's there. It's
Yeah.
there. You bring it with you. You become that place. And I've got two older boys who are out paying taxes who will tell you what dad was like when he was the corrections professional who did not take that first rule. very
Yeah.
seriously. Um, the second piece of advice that I would give any person going out there: take every opportunity to do every little thing that they ask you. The first things are not going to be the best. They're going to be the things nobody wants to do. But if they're extra, take it. Get the extra training for it. Get the whatever they're gonna. It's all free. People love free. I love free education. Take the free everything that they will give you to get better. Doesn't matter what it is. Take it, and eventually it will build to the thing that you're really passionate about. Right. I think one of the first things I took, I don't remember, I think it may have been first aid CPR. Right. That was the people like, I don't want to do first aid CPR training or some, or whatever, it was something, maybe a PRIA something. I can't remember. It was some training. I think Ian was talking about the use of force or the report writing
Right.
course, right? There's always something that nobody really wants to be, but if it's free. So take every chance to get something and become better, and you will go places. You will, but you've got to take it and you got to run with it. So take care of your family, take care of you, take every opportunity that they will give you and ask for them. They're there just waiting.
That is probably the best advice I've ever heard for new officers. I think there's so many new guys that are like, no, I want to do the cool thing now, right? And it's just not how it goes, man.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for that. Um, Man, just great sitting down and chatting with you. I really appreciate your time. And if you want to get a hold of Tim or you have questions, you can go through our website and we'll launch some stuff out there. If you want Tim to be a part of your in-service training, also go to our website. That's www.arctac.net. That's arctac.net. And we're going to get people connected. But thank you so much, brother. I appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you, brother. Bye.